Anytime we start something new, we are not going to be good at it, and writing is no exception. I want to talk today about 5 common mistakes that I made as a new writer that I see other writers making as well. For anyone new to the channel, my name is Seth. I'm a full-time fantasy author. I like to make YouTube videos about stuff. Really, I should probably pick a theme for this channel, but I'm having fun. So let's jump right into it. 5 common mistakes for new writers. And again, these are all mistakes that I have specifically made. So this is not like I went online and was like, what are mistakes that new writers make? No, this is like what I really struggled with. I should have titled this video, My Top 5 Mistakes, or something along those lines, because these are really things that I did over and over again, and it's taken me a long time to work through. In some cases, I'm still working through. Anyway, remember how I said let's get into it? Let's get into it. So, number 1, talking about writing, but not writing. Oh my goodness. This is a mistake that is really hard to break because the idea of doing something is so often so much more fun than the actual doing of it. What do I mean by that? Well, there's a common saying that everybody likes having written. I really enjoy it when one of my books comes out. The process of actually writing the book and sweating over it and crying over it and shedding my blood to get the words down, not quite so enjoyable. But the fruit of it, having the book out, being able to give it to people, being able to see their reactions, being able to share my stories with people, that is sweet fruit indeed. But so often, I, as a new writer, would get caught in talking about all of the cool things I was going to do instead of actually doing them. And it took me a long time to realize that talking about something, talking about your hopes and your dreams and your desires is not the same thing as actually chasing them, actually doing them, actually making progress. There is no action you can take as an author that is more beneficial to you than sitting down to write. In fact, more words, though volume isn't everything, the more words that we write, the better we are going to get. And so if I had to come up with a solution for how to maybe fix this problem, I would say build a writing habit. Figure out what works for you and commit yourself to writing consistently. Problem number 2, writing your story as a list of facts. One of the things that I really struggled with was just sort of listing what happened to my protagonist. First this happened, then that happened, and then this other thing happened, and then another thing happened. And that is part of what makes a good plot. Interesting things happening is part of what makes a good plot. But at the end of the day, that's not a story. That's a list of facts. A story is not only what happens, but what impact that thing has on everything else, on your character, on your world, on the whole story. But it can get easy to get caught up in a list of here's the next thing that happens, here's the next scene that comes, here's how they react to that, and here's where they go and what they do. Because action is easier to write, and in a lot of cases it's more exciting to read. But what really ties a story together, what really gives it the impact, is understanding how the events that take place, how that list of facts actually affects the characters and the world that we are reading about. So the solution to this is pretty simple. Help us see what has changed about the character that you're writing about and about the world that you're writing in. Give us a glimpse. Show us what difference those events have made. The third problem that I really struggled with is getting lost in explaining context. This was a bad one, and it happens a lot, and it's probably why most people would glaze over whenever I open my mouth to talk to them. You know, it can be really easy to feel like context is necessary, especially when we have entire worlds in our heads, usually more than one. When we talk to people about those worlds, we really want to give them all of the details so they can enjoy it as fully as we do. The problem is that often that's just too much context. Context is wonderful, and it's actually really, really important. But the more context you have, the less space you have for wonder, the less you are able to engage the other person's mind and draw them to participate in your story. And ultimately, our goal is to get our readers to participate in our story. So the more context we dump on them, the harder it is going to be for them to do their own engaging. You might think of context like icing. A little bit of icing on a cake can magnify a cake. It can improve the taste. It can make the experience of eating more enjoyable. But there is definitely a threshold. And once you cross that threshold, there's no going back. Have you ever gotten a piece of cake and you took a bite and it was so sickeningly sweet because of all of the icing that you either had to scrape it off onto your nephew's plate or you just didn't eat the cake? Context is important and it should be on the cake of our world, but we want it applied judiciously rather than smothering the actual substance of our world and story. The fourth problem that I had is that I rarely allowed my characters to fail, if ever. Now understand, I really like the OP protagonist trope. I write overpowered characters now. I think it's so fun. It's one of the main reasons that I read. I love to see overpowered characters. But failure is one of the most human experiences ever. In fact, it might be the most human experience. And how we respond to failure determines who we are as people. So when a reader reads about a character with a perfect life who never misses or never fails to get what they want, their suspension of disbelief is immediately broken. That suspension of disbelief, once broken, is the hardest thing to recover as an author. Failure and the growth that results from failure are the two things that make a story sing. And I didn't know that. As a young writer, I was as much writing my wish fulfillment into my story as I was considering the reader who was going to read it. But as I grew as an author, I started to consider the reader a little bit more, and I started to understand that no, we really want our characters to fail. We just want them to fail strategically. Ultimately, we want them to succeed, but that strategic failure is going to give them the growth they need to get that big success at the end. And number 5, allowing feedback to determine how I felt about myself. This one is tough, and I get it. And this is one that I still have to deal with on a regular basis. Fear of feedback can come in a few forms. It can be fear of future feedback, thinking that you don't want to give out your manuscript or give out a section of your writing to somebody because you're afraid of what they might say. But it can be worse than that. And this is what happened to me. Occasionally, I simply wouldn't write something for fear that I would have to give it to other people to read. And so it would be paralyzing. You can also be afraid of current feedback. You can sit on a manuscript continually trying to improve it and perfect it because you're afraid that if you give it to somebody, they might say something mean about it or something that you don't want to hear. And you can be caught in fear of past feedback. I remember that there was a period of time when I was a young writer when I had gotten some particularly harsh feedback. It was true feedback, like it was real, and what they were saying was true, but it was pretty harsh, and I didn't like it. But I sat in that place, in that fear of that feedback, and it prevented me from writing because I assumed that all future feedback I got would be the same as what that person had said before, that I wouldn't have grown as a writer. But there's something that's really important to understand. I'm a writer. Whether I'm a good writer or a bad writer, not particularly important. I'm a writer, and I'm always going to be a writer. And I'm a writer because, remember that first point? I write stuff. The feedback that I get on my manuscript is about my manuscript. It's not about me. My value as a person, as a writer, doesn't change because somebody likes or doesn't like the thing that I've written. Instead, feedback is an opportunity to get better. It's an opportunity to ask that all-important question, what can I improve? So we should never be afraid of feedback. In fact, we should embrace feedback as aggressively as we possibly can. You know, I'm continuing to work on all 5 of these issues in one form or another, and I hope you'll join me. It takes hard work and real dedication to be a writer, but I'm incredibly excited to read the stories that you guys come up with. Keep going. Keep writing. It will be worth it.